Take Back Your Book, An Author's Guide to Rights Reversion and Publishing on Your Terms. Written by Katlyn Duncan. Narrated by Jillian Yetter. Introduction. The dream for a lot of writers is to see their books on bookshelves. We want to spot readers posting beautifully curated photos on Instagram with glowing reviews, and to hear how amazing our books are all across the internet. That's all well and good, but no pun intended here. Books have shelf lives, especially those published through a publishing house. The seasons of publishing with a large or small press turn over so quickly, and once your season has passed, then there's not much you can do for your book after that. Or is there? There are many clauses of a book contract that will affect your author career, but this guide is all about rights reversion. Why? It's a clause that can revive your book from the forgotten part of the shelf. Rights reversion allows you to grab that dusty baby of yours and clean it off for a whole new audience. The best part is, you will finally take control over the entire process. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Let's start with who I am and why I'm so passionate about this topic. My journey. In 2009, I started taking my writing career seriously. I remember the moment my first book idea came into my head. I was walking through a parking lot, and the story struck me like lightning. It was one of those unforgettable, life-changing moments. I wrote this book during National Novel Writing Month, NaNoWriMo, which is an annual event held in November to finish a 50,000-word book within a month. I drafted that year and several after, until I had a solid story. At this point, I was working full-time in the medical field and didn't put aside the time for my writing, other than in November for a few years. Shortly after NaNoWriMo 2012, there was a call for submissions for a new digital-first imprint of Harlequin UK. To caveat, I would never recommend submitting a book after NaNoWriMo, as most of the time a writer would have pushed through a first draft with little editing to win. But this was my fourth iteration of the book, and it was in fairly good condition. From that submission, the publisher reached out, and I had a phone conversation with an editor. Ultimately, they loved the book and wanted a 3-book series. It was an absolute dream come true. I asked all the right questions, and it seemed like a perfect fit. The 3-book contract, Contract 1, landed in my inbox, and I lived on cloud 9 for weeks. I did my due diligence, notice the quotes here, and sent the contract to a lawyer who worked with us on selling our house. Mistake number 1. I feel the winces and eye rolls. Hindsight is always 20/20. This lawyer did his best with the contract language, but as I came to realize, he didn't advise me of the nuances of a publishing contract, at least when it came to what exactly I was signing away. Proper knowledge about publishing is a must if you want to protect your books and career. Fast forward to spring 2013. My debut novel, Soul Taken, the first in a series, the Life After series, of 3 young adult paranormal books, was out in the world. I was over the moon and had the debut author glow all the way to the release of the last book in the series, which, incidentally, was less than a year later. Go Digital First Publishing. A note on Digital First Publishing. This means the book will only come out in ebook to start. If the sales numbers skyrocket, the publisher may consider other formats, paperback, audio, etc. While I buried my head in drafting and editing the next 2 books, I thought everything would work out fine, because I had a publisher who was promoting my books. Mistake number 2. If you don't already know, most publishers don't actively promote all the books on their lists the same. Unless you're a top title for the season, much of the promotion depends on you. Sure, there was the opportunity for social media posts and submissions to promotions that came later on, i.e., BookBub. But I had paid for my blog tour, book swag, and any other promotions for this series out of my pocket. The next contract, Contract 2, came soon after, and my debut series would live on. Or so I thought. My first brush with the idea of rights reversion was with the book I wrote while pregnant and then edited 2 months postpartum. Again, digital first publishing moves fast, but I would never recommend this for new parents because lack of sleep doesn't make a great book. It absolutely tanked within the first few months of release. When I caught up with my editor about the next book in the series, she suggested I move in a different direction with my genres. Instead of giving up, I asked for promotions to bring the book in front of new readers, but was told that maybe the book would have sold better if it was in a different genre. I'll let that settle in for a second. She said, my book might have done better, the book that was already published, if it was in a different genre, even though this book had gone through edits as a paranormal novel. To say I was dumbfounded was an understatement. This advice should have been given in the editing stage. Can you tell I'm still a little bitter? There's no use writing a book like this without honesty. For reference, that novel has sold under 100 copies in its lifetime. It's an absolute failure. No doubt the editor realized that and swiftly encouraged me to write contemporary novels with a dark twist. I had another book and a novella in this contract, so there was nothing I could do but move on. This was where my writer friends came to the rescue. I learned that this wasn't an isolated incident. Books that didn't hit the mark in sales were left to die at the bottom of the book charts. But no one loved those stories as much as we did. We wanted to see them thrive, but we had signed away all control. What could we do? One of those lovely humans informed me about rights reversion. Immediately, I flipped open my contract and found that buried treasure. I contacted the contracts department with a request to return this book to me at once. Mistake number 3. I swear I was nicer than that. The contracts department sent me a reply that I wasn't even close to the threshold amount of years that the book could fall under consideration of reversion. So there was nothing they could do. How dare they, right? That is a rhetorical question. Here's the hard truth. I signed this contract. My signature bound these terms to me and my books. I had to move forward, knowing that this book would fail, and there was nothing I could do about it. A year later, when my contract ended, my editor informed me that young adult was no longer an age range that they were publishing, which, in hindsight, probably assisted my process of rights reversion. My young adult option book idea was rejected, and its subsequent adult alternative, so I was contract-free for a bit. This was disheartening, but I saw it as an opportunity to get an agent and continue publishing my young adult thrillers. A few months later, a new editor at the same imprint emailed me, asking if I was interested in writing a book about mermaids, as they were the new trend. Up to this point, I had been ghostwriting for a few years, so I saw this as an opportunity to collaborate. They gave me a 3-novella deal, Contract 3. I hired a literary lawyer who pointed out clauses that I should work to get altered. The main contention points for me were the option clause and keeping audio rights. As an author with no agent, I had a lot of pushback from the publisher. With those emails filled with refusals to my requests, I felt ungrateful. They had given me the opportunity to write these books. So what right did I have to ask to keep some sub-rights and change clauses? It was the wrong mindset, which I know now. Books take a lot of time to conceive, write, edit, and promote. With digital-first publishing, most authors don't get an advance, and with my contract, I didn't see any royalties until at least 3 months post-publication. I signed the contract, and from that moment through to publishing the third novella, this took about a year to get them all out. Both editors, who wanted the books in the first place, had left the imprint. My champions were gone, and I was thrust upon other editors who weren't as passionate about these books. Can you guess what happened? Those books, again, tanked. That new contract meant a new option clause, which is an entire book in itself, but basically means that the publisher has first refusal to my next similar book. These differ wildly across the board, but mine wouldn't allow me to publish unless I gave them the book to check out first. As young adult was no longer an option, I gave them an adult Christmas novel that had lived in my head for years. They offered another 2-book contract, Contract 4, and as I'd built up enough confidence, finally, I asked to retain film rights, as Christmas movies aren't in short supply, and the royalty that I would have to split was too high for my comfort. Sure, this is a pipe dream, but why not? As I expected, they pushed back. But you know what? I had nothing to lose at this point. I knew enough about contracts that even if I gave them the option book, I could still refuse a contract. No one was more shocked than me when they agreed to let me keep those rights. Finally a win, right? At that point, I was energized to take control. So when the first book in my debut series came up for reversion, I took it. This winning streak didn't quit as they decided to revert the entire series, even though the second and third books' rights hadn't expired. Now I had 3 books that I had full control over. They were and still are the books of my heart, and I had to get them back into the world. But this time, under my terms. Once the books were down from all the retailers, I had to make a plan. I've never self-published before, and I wanted to research what others did. This time, Google failed me. Okay, the search engine didn't, but I couldn't find more than a handful of articles, most from 5 or more years prior, about what authors did after reversion. Did they republish these books? Drawer them? Give them away for free? What? I suppose the basic information about rights reversion in those articles hasn't changed, but I wondered if there was more to this story. I asked as many authors as I could what they did after reversion, but I still wasn't satisfied. My wonder took me on a deep dive for months about what I should do for this series. And then this book, yes, the one you're reading now, hit me like a lightning bolt. And I knew from past experience, I couldn't let it go. Lessons learned from my mistakes. Always have a lawyer or agent who is familiar with literary contracts review a contract prior to signing. Understand that unless you are one of the top books of the season, you will have to promote your book in some capacity. When asking for reversion prior to the threshold, you better have a solid argument for those rights, or you will have to be patient. What to expect from this book. A brief overview of rights reversion and how to ask for those rights. Options for your book after reversion. Monetary considerations of republishing. Considerations for your author career as an independent or hybrid author. Success stories from authors who have had their rights reverted. Success stories. As I mentioned, there wasn't a lot of tangible information out there on others' paths after rights reversion. So, I did my own research, and that involved asking writer friends if they knew anyone who had been in my position before, and also scouring online author groups for threads discussing this topic. I found a few, and they are mentioned in this book. I am beyond grateful to those who have taken the time to share their story to help authors in similar situations. My hope for these interviews is that you connect with a story and find inspiration to keep your books alive. Disclaimers and definitions. I am not a lawyer. While I have actively negotiated 2 of my 4 contracts, this guide doesn't contain legal advice for literary contracts. In my experience, the biggest thing I've learned is that unless you are a literary lawyer, always seek advice before signing anything. Again, this is so important that it bears repeating. Ask for help whenever you don't understand something. Contract language is hard to read for someone who doesn't scour through it daily. Many authors think that a publisher has them and their book's best interests in mind. But they are a business. Do your due diligence, please. Helpful resources I've found to assist authors get the best contract they can. Literary agents. If you have an agent, discuss the publishing contract with them to make sure you understand all the clauses and that they are to your liking. Authors Guild. Depending on your membership, you have access to lawyers who are ready to review your contract, help with reversion of rights, give recommendations about changes, and so much more. Alliance of Independent Authors, Ally. Similar to Authors Guild, with your membership, you have access to general legal and business advice for contracts and more. Literary lawyers. If you aren't interested in joining a society, you can hire a private lawyer. In this instance, you could search or ask author groups for recommendations. After doing research on them, make the best choice for you, and always ask questions to ensure that you understand every single line of what you're signing away. Publishers aren't bad. My biggest hesitation in writing this guide was that readers would think I was a scorned author who hated publishers. This is not true at all. This isn't a revenge story, but an empowering one. I have no plans to shut that door entirely, as I do believe that traditional publishing offers fantastic opportunities for some writers. Typically, this route takes 18 months to 2 years to get the book from contract to release, faster for most digital publishers. A significant amount of books fall out of favor within 1 season before they are replaced with the new and shiny. If you cannot continuously churn out bestsellers, the chances of making a living wage is slim, which is why so many authors, whether or not they announce it, are doing freelance on the side, or taking a hybrid approach by self-publishing to supplement the advance or royalty payments that may only come once in the case of royalties, or quarterly if you earned out your advance or have gone with a higher royalty structure with no advance. Remember when I said that books that aren't sticky fall out of favor? It's not the publisher's or the author's fault that one specific book didn't quite hit the mark for the net that was cast. But why not take control if your publisher isn't going to? As I try to do with my advice to authors privately or on public platforms, I believe in honesty and protecting authors. And this is one way to protect your career and the books you've spent so much time with. Definitions. There are so many variables with contracts or literary projects, but to make this guide simpler to follow, I'm defining a few terms. Publisher. The big 4 traditional publishers, Penguin Random House, Hachette Book Group, HarperCollins, and Macmillan, aren't the only businesses out there who have contracts with reversion clauses. As you will see in the success stories, a myriad of options are available. So when I say publisher, that includes traditional, independent presses, small presses, hybrid publishers, basically any contract where the author signs away their rights to publish a book. Book. Any project that's been published, whether it's a collection of poems, short stories, novellas, novels, etc. Subrights. Subsidiary rights refer to offering the book in other media. This can include serial rights, translations, electronic books, audio recording, dramatization rights, book clubs, merchandising, other publications, etc.